Welcome back to Coast Sports. Today we are talking March Madness men's basketball. A lot to recap over the weekend. We're just going to go through everything. We're going to talk about all the teams and go through everything. And we're going to begin with Duke. The Duke Blue Devils, they escaped an early challenge from Siena, and then they get past TCU as well. They're headed to the Sweet 16. So that's kind of what we're going to do. We're going to go through every team in the Sweet 16. I'm going to talk about do I think they have a real chance at winning the whole thing. So we do begin with Duke, and I think Duke is the favorites. I think most people believe Duke is the best team in this tournament, and for better or for worse, they've proved it on the field all season long, on the court all season long. They were the best team in the ACC. They've been very, very impressive, and they took down Siena in a very narrow game. Shout out to 16 seed Siena, only losing 71-65. The Siena Saints playing very well, but ultimately it was Duke. They got the better of them. Duke was the better team. Cam Boozer was really, really good, 13 for 14 from free throw line. He scores 22 points. And that was kind of what it took. I mean, it took Duke playing very well from hitting almost all of their free throws. Duke did not hit very many of their threes. That's why Siena was kind of able to stay in that game. Siena hit a bunch of threes. But Duke, they're the better team. They do move on. Then we had one of the best 9-8 games in this tournament. Ohio State against TCU. TCU winning only 66-64. It's a low-scoring, gritty game, defensive game. TCU pulling it out at the last minute, but TCU ultimately was not able to defeat Duke. They actually kept it close quite a while. They kept it close in that one, but Duke pulled away in the second half, winning 81-58, and Duke punches their tickets to the Sweet 16. So not anything that's very shocking. Everybody kind of believed that Duke would get there. Everybody saw it coming. And now for Duke, it's a question of, hey, can you put your money where your mouth is, right? They were the favorites last year. They end up losing. They go down they didn't make it to the national title game, or did they make it to the national title game? Now I'm forgetting. Did they lose to Florida? I forget. And that goes to show, yeah, I guess they. What did they do? Florida, Duke, national championship. I don't think they got there. I don't think they got there. Who did Duke lose to? They lost in 2025 to Alabama in the Elite Eight. No, they beat Alabama. They lost to Houston in the Final Four. Okay, makes sense. So they weren't able to do it last year, lose to Houston in the Final Four. I think that they are going to be able to get there this year. I think they have the opportunity to. Now, I think UConn's going to give them a big fight if UConn gets the Elite Eight. I think UConn-Duke is probably the best Elite Eight game out there. But Duke's got to prove it. You know, they had the best team on paper last year, weren't able to win it. Do they have the best team this year? I think they do. Can they win it? We'll have to see. Now, the team that Duke will be taking on in Sweet 16 is St. John's, who won one of the craziest March Madness games. But first, let's talk about the first round. The St. John's defeated Northern Iowa in a 5-12 game. They win 79-53 in a game that went pretty much the way we would expect. Northern Iowa struggled a lot. I'm not sure if they deserved even a 12 seed, but we'll see. Kansas taking down Cal Baptist 68-60. Cal Baptist, kudos to them. They kept it very close. They made 23% of their three-pointers, but Cal Baptist couldn't make their free throws. They go 10 for 19 from the free throw line, just 52%. That ultimately ends up being the difference, and they lose 68-60. So then it was St. John's, Kansas, the 5-4 game, a great showdown. St. John's led pretty much the whole time. Kansas stormed back in the end, makes it a close game. They tied up about 60-60. Then all of a sudden, Kansas takes a lead. They get tied up again, 65-65, and it was St. John's on a buzzer beater. Shout out to Dylan Darling, former Idaho State legend. Dylan Darling, in his first points of the game, he is the hero for St. John's. So just a massive, massive win for them, getting back to the Sweet 16 for the first time since, I believe, in 1999. And St. John's is really re-emerging as a college basketball powerhouse. Shout out to their coach, Rick Pitino, who's really got that program on a roll. I think St. John's will be able to give Duke a fight. I don't anticipate them winning that game. I think Duke will win. I have them winning in my bracket, but I think that St. John's keeps it close, and I wouldn't be surprised to see another upset. St. John's has the talent to do it. Next, let's talk about Michigan State. They are also headed to the Sweet 16. They cruised past North Dakota State, winning 92-67 in the first round. North Dakota State, they were just outmatched by a really good Michigan State Spartans team. And then Louisville getting past South Florida in a very close 6-11 game. A lot of people really liked South Florida. Some people even thought South Florida could be a dark horse team to reach the Sweet 16, but ultimately Louisville gets by 83-79. That sets up Louisville against Michigan, the 3 against the 6. And it was Michigan State who wins. They win 77-69 over the Cardinals. Louisville shot pretty well, but Michigan State, they went 42% of their threes, making 11 out of 26. They also make 73% of their free throws, 39 rebounds. They out-rebounded them by a lot. Most of those were defensive rebounds. That was able to give the Spartans more opportunities to possess the ball, and the Spartans did come out on top. I think they play really big. They play really physical. They're going to give UConn a really good fight. That's going to be a really fun Sweet 16 game as well. So the Michigan State Spartans, they are moving on. And the team taking on Michigan State in the Sweet 16 is going to be UConn as they soared through their side of the bracket. UConn defeating Furman 82-71. Furman kept it close most of the game. The big difference here was that Furman just could not get any boards, especially on offense. Furman with only 4 offensive rebounds, UConn with 18. UConn in total had 44 rebounds compared to Furman with only 23. So UConn 19 more rebounds. That's the difference maker right there. They both shot pretty well. Furman actually made 9 threes. UConn only made 5. But UConn just had the ball way more. They win 82-71. Meanwhile, the 7-10 game, UCF was very, very close to pulling off the upset over the UCLA Bruins. UCLA ultimately pulling it out. They win 75-71. But yeah, it was very close. UCLA, they played a great game. UCF gave it their best shot, but UCLA moves on. And then against UConn, UCLA was hanging around for most of the early game. They actually had the lead for quite a bit of the first half, but UConn pulls away. They win 73 to 57. And again, UConn just doing such a good job getting boards. They with 36 rebounds compared to UCLA only 24. So for UConn, part of it is that, yeah, they get a lot of rebounds. Part of it is that they do a really good job of not letting their opponent get rebounds. I think that is what is going to give them the best chance. I think they, against Michigan State, are going to match up really, really well. Michigan State does average more rebounds per game than UConn, so I'm interested to see how that will play out. I think UConn will win, and I actually think they can beat Duke as well. I have UConn going to the Final Four. Duke's going to be really, really good. And if we can see a Duke-UConn game, I would love to see that. But yeah, my prediction would be to see UConn and Duke in the Final Four. I guess in the Elite Eight, I should say. I have UConn going to the Elite Eight, I have UConn beating Duke in the Elite Eight to move on to the Final Four, if that makes sense. So I think that could be the best Elite Eight game we see, would be a Duke-UConn showdown. Michigan State's going to have their hands full with this UConn team. This is a good veteran UConn squad. I expect them to play like it, and I expect them to move on. We have Iowa, one of the only Cinderella stories, and I don't know if you can really even count a Big Ten team as a Cinderella story, but they're not really known as a basketball school, and Iowa took down the number 1 seed and the reigning champions in a 73-72 game. We'll get to that in a sec. First, let's talk about the first round. Florida absolutely pounced on the Prairie View A&M Panthers, winning 114-55. So the Panthers clearly did not deserve to be there, and that was obvious. Florida, on paper, probably the second or third best team in this tournament. They obviously won it last year. A lot of returners from that team, including guys like Ruben Chinyelu, who has been one of their best players all season long. So there's Florida. They move on. Iowa beats Clemson in a 9-8 thriller. Iowa winning 67-61 over the Clemson Tigers, a game in which Iowa made only 28% of their three-pointers, but they made 24 out of 31 free throws. That's insane to make 24 free throws in a game and to get 31. So Iowa moves on, and then we got Iowa against Florida. Most people would not have even thought this would be a good game the way Florida dominated against Prairie View, but Florida took their feet off the gas. Iowa pounced. Iowa responded. And how about Iowa? Despite being outshot and out three-point shot, they end up winning this game. 73-72, a one-point game, a one-point win. Florida had more steals. Florida had more blocks. Florida had more turnovers, more assists. They had the same amount of rebounds, each team with 27 rebounds. It was a very, very even game, and Iowa wins. So a huge upset for Iowa to beat the number 1 seed. Florida's the only 1 seed that doesn't make the Sweet 16. And now Iowa has a winnable game against a Nebraska team that is a huge, huge rival. And speaking of Nebraska, again, not sure if you can really call them a Cinderella. They're a 4 seed from the Big Ten. But Nebraska has not won a March Madness game ever until this year. They finally win their first ever March Madness game. They beat Troy 76-47 in the first round. Then they score up against Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt had beaten McNeese in the first round 78-68. Vanderbilt against Nebraska was actually one of the best games of the second round, of the round of 32. Vanderbilt led for most of the second half. Nebraska led for most of the first half. Nebraska storms back at the end. They tie it up at 72-72, and then they pierce through Vanderbilt's defense to get a last-minute shot off. They win it 74-72. Nebraska with the win over Vandy. A very, very good game. Nebraska shot 55%. Vanderbilt only shooting 41% from the field, and Nebraska, shout out to them, making 47% of their three-pointers. They also go 7 for 10 from the free throw line. It was, again, very, very evenly matched. 31 rebounds for Nebraska, 30 for Vanderbilt. Vandy hung in there as best as they could. But Nebraska, I do think they deserve to win. I think they played slightly better, so I thought it was the right call on Nebraska to win that game. And now we end up with, a huge rivalry game between two Big Ten schools. Neither of them are really traditional basketball schools. And between Iowa and Nebraska, one of those two schools is going to the Elite Eight. That is going to be really, really good for either program. If Nebraska can win a third game, that would be incredible for them. I actually might choose Iowa to get there. I, of course, had Florida moving on in my bracket. I had Florida going into the Final Four, so that's, I had Florida going into the Elite Eight. I might actually take Iowa to beat Nebraska if I was picking this game, but I think it'll be very, very close. Another team doing very well for themselves in this tournament is Illinois. Illinois taking down Penn 105-70 in their, what are they? Is that the South? Is that the East? I'm not sure what level that is, or the South. Yeah, in the South. What region is? Excuse me. But Illinois taking down Penn 105-70. One of the only teams to score over 100 games in this tournament. Penn, of course, winning the Ivy League. They were not really true contenders in this field at all. But yeah, shout out to Penn for getting there. Meanwhile, VCU with an upset over North Carolina, 82-78. North Carolina, a traditional kind of blue blood school, falling short, losing to VCU. But at that point, it became pretty clear who the favorite was in this Illinois-VCU game. VCU, I don't think they stood much of a chance. Illinois is a much better team. The Fighting Illini winning 76-55 over VCU. And so that's how we end up with the Fighting Illini in the Sweet 16, where they will be taking on the team that I think is the best in this tournament, the Houston Cougars. And maybe it is because I am a Washington State Cougar, but man, I love this Houston Cougars team, and I really think that they are the best team in this tournament. I have them going all the way to the national championship game and winning it all, and I'm glad to see so far they have been doing very well. They destroyed Idaho. They demolished them 78-47. Shout out to the Vandals for getting into the bracket in the first place. The Vandals ended up going on a crazy run to win the Big Sky. They were the 8th seed in that Big Sky, and they made a run in the tournament to get into the NCAA tournament, getting that 15 seed, avoiding a first four, which I thought Idaho was for sure going to be playing in a 16 seed game. Didn't end up happening. They get the 15 seed. They get destroyed by Houston either way. Meanwhile, St. Mary's continues their kind of lackluster March Madness streak. They've made 5 straight March Madness tournaments. They've still not made it out of the round of 32, and for the third time in those 5 years, they've lost in the first round. They lose 63-50 against the 10-seeded Texas A&M Aggies. So St. Mary's, we keep giving them at-large bids to the Gales, and I don't know, do they deserve it? They've been doing very well for themselves in the West Coast Conference. They're going to, once Gonzaga leaves that conference, they're probably going to get the auto bid every single year just by winning the conference. But Texas A&M was the better team. They win 63-50. And then we end up with A&M against Houston. And for Houston, they, again, rolled through A&M. A&M did not stand a chance. The Cougars looked the part. So I'm very happy to see that as they end up with 30 field goals, 8 three-pointers, just 25% from the three-point. But I think they'll improve their shooting as they get better. And you love to see 46 rebounds to 29 for A&M, 19 offensive rebounds, 27 defensive rebounds. Houston plays a very physical brand of basketball. I really like the way they play. I think it matches up perfectly with Florida. The good news for them, though, is Florida's not even going to be the team they play in the Elite Eight, right? If Houston beats Illinois, they will play either Iowa or Nebraska. I think that's about as good of a matchup as you can hope for Houston. I almost think Houston, if they get past Illinois, they are a lock for the Final Four. And at that point, I have it Houston against UConn. It might be Houston Duke. That's probably what it'll be. Maybe Michigan State sneaks into the Final Four, but my guess it'll be either Duke or UConn for them in the Final Four. And I think Houston, again, matches up very well. I think they can go on a big run. We'll have to see what happens, but right now I'm rolling with the Cougars. Moving over to the top side of the bracket, Arizona is moving on into the Sweet 16 as they look like the best team so far in the west side of the field. They destroyed Long Island 92-58 and matched up against Utah State. Utah State, they beat Villanova 86-76 in a really good first round game, which saw Utah State make 37 rebounds, 19 assists, 4 steals. It was a I thought Utah State probably deserved to be higher than a 9 seed. I thought they played more like a 6 or a 7 seed. They've been very good in the Mountain West for quite some time now. But Arizona was the better team. Utah State hung around. Shout out to the Aggies for making it close, keeping it close, but the Wildcats ultimately moving on. They win 78-66. And so the number 1 seed, Arizona, they are moving on to the Sweet 16, where I think they're going to have a pretty good opportunity to move on and reach the Elite Eight once again. They are going to be taking on Arkansas in the Sweet 16. And Arkansas, they played well. I don't think they are as good of a team as Arizona. I don't think they're nearly as good. And man, how about that Arkansas High Point game? That was a thriller of a game. High Point almost getting to the Sweet 16, almost giving us a true Cinderella. Because again, we don't really have any true Cinderellas. We have all power schools, and I do think the UConn and St. John's count as power schools. In this case, they are part of the Big East, which is a power conference for basketball, I would say. So yeah, I mean, it was a very chalky tournament. High Point gave it their best shot. High Point defeating Wisconsin in a buzzer beater to win 83-82. Not a buzzer beater. Wisconsin tried a buzzer beater and missed it. But High Point took the lead with about 20 seconds left, something like that. High Point defeating Wisconsin in a 12-5 game. They win 83-82. Wisconsin upset once again in the first round. High Point then goes on to take on Arkansas. Now, Arkansas got past Hawaii. They won 97-78. A lot of people thought Hawaii might have a chance against Arkansas. They did not. Arkansas pulling ahead in that one. So Arkansas against High Point was a pretty anticipated showdown, a 4 versus 12. High Point, again, to their credit, they played very well. They made 34 of their field goals. Arkansas made 35. High Point 10 threes. Arkansas 9 threes. Arkansas ultimately 15 for 20 from the free throw line. High Point 10 for 11 from the free throw line, but they just didn't get enough opportunities. Arkansas had 1 more rebound. They had 1 more assist. They had 3 more steals. The big difference, Arkansas with 5 blocks. High Point only 1. So Arkansas, they use their physicality. They use their height to their advantage. They win 94-88. Again, it was a very, very close game. High Point had all the opportunity in the world to win that game, but instead it was Arkansas that moves on. They'll take on Arizona, but again, I don't think Arkansas stands much of a chance against Arizona, considering that Arkansas almost lost to High Point, and Arizona so far has not looked weak at all in this tournament. I have Arizona moving on over Arkansas. And the only other real Cinderella in this field is Texas, who defeated Gonzaga in a really close second round game. Again, it's hard to really call Texas a Cinderella. They're about as much of a Cinderella as Iowa. They're a low-seeded power conference school. They're an 11 seed, but they do move on. They beat Gonzaga. Pretty impressive to see them beat Gonzaga, although I do wonder, do we have to have a conversation about Gonzaga? When do we start this conversation? Mark Few, he's been there for 25 years, more than that. I believe 30 years he's been there. He's made the tournament a bunch. He's still never won the tournament, and he's starting to get to the point where Gonzaga is not – they used to be at least like Gonzaga's going to make the Sweet 16 every year. That used to be what it was. Not anymore, right? Gonzaga's kind of falling off. They lost in the round of 32 last year. They lose in the round of 32 again this year. So Gonzaga, they're going to need to get their act together. Mark Few, I don't know. I think he's a really good coach. We'll see how they do in the Pac-12. It'll be slightly better competition in the Pac-12. They'll have to play against teams like Utah State, San Diego State. They're still the best team in that conference, though. But yeah, Texas moving on. They defeat Gonzaga 74-68. How'd they get there? Well, Gonzaga beat Kennesaw State in a close game, 73-64. So the writing was kind of on the wall for the Bulldogs. may have been a little bit overrated this year. Did they deserve a 3 seed? I'm not so sure that they did. I might have given them a 4 or a 5 seed. Meanwhile, Texas defeated everybody's favorite BYU, the BYU Cougars losing 79-71. And so after pulling off a pair of upsets and winning their play-in game, Texas is into the Sweet 16. It's going to be a difficult matchup for them. They have to take on Purdue, who we'll talk about in a sec. But Texas, they're going to be live dogs against Purdue, and I think they could definitely make some noise in the Sweet 16. We'll have to see what happens. And yeah, let's talk about Purdue. That's who will be squaring off with that Cinderella run in Texas. Purdue, they destroyed Queens 104-71 in the first round. Miami took down Missouri 80-66 in the first round as well. So we get a Purdue versus Miami game in the second round. Miami played very well, and I thought Miami even may have had a good chance at winning this game. I thought about picking them. I didn't. I did pick Purdue, and I'm glad I did because Purdue does ultimately win by 10, 79-69. But Miami played a good game. They actually scored more field goals. I thought they shot better. But Purdue was so good from the three-point line. That's why. Purdue 8 for 14 of three-pointers. They make 57% of their threes. Purdue also 21 for 22 from the free throw line, 95.5% of their free throws. But Miami had more rebounds. Miami had 10 more offensive rebounds. Miami had more steals. I thought they played better defensively. It's just Purdue couldn't miss from the free throw line or from deep, from beyond the arc. Purdue played very well, and I do think Purdue will beat Texas. I think Purdue-Arizona probably is your matchup you're looking at in the Elite Eight from the West. And if that's what we get, it's going to be a good showdown. Purdue-Arizona will be very fun. Two teams that have kind of underachieved recently, but two teams that are both massive traditional basketball, blue blood powerhouse type schools squaring off in what should be a really fun Elite Eight game. And then in the final region, the Midwest region, we have Michigan. Michigan, another 1 seed, another team moving on to the Sweet 16. They've so far not faced a whole lot of difficulty. They beat Howard 101-80, so they win that game by 21. And they beat St. Louis by 23. They win that game 95-72. Shout out to St. Louis for beating Georgia, winning that game 102-77. St. Louis absolutely dominated Georgia. A lot of people like Georgia going into this tournament, but St. Louis ended up proving that they were far and away the better team. And St. Louis probably deserved to be better than a 9 seed. I hate that some of these teams who get matched up. I mean, St. Louis, if they were playing against a team like Tech or a team like Bama or a team like Tennessee, they easily could have won that game. But to match up with Michigan is a tough matchup for them. Michigan Wolverines moving on. And they are going to have their hands full with either Alabama they will be playing Alabama. So they're going to have their hands full with Alabama. I think Alabama is a great matchup for them. I do think Michigan will beat Alabama, but I think it could be very close. I think Alabama will keep it very close and give Michigan a good fight. And how about Alabama, a school that continues to become a basketball powerhouse? There again, going back to the Sweet 16, they'll face off with Michigan there. In football, Michigan-Bama would be considered a great game, and it's going to be a great one in basketball too. Alabama, they get there by beating Hofstra 90-70 and then beating Texas Tech 90-65. Texas Tech, who a lot of people like Texas Tech to beat Alabama, they ended up getting kind of destroyed. The Red Raiders really struggled. They went 21 for 61 from the field. Only 34% of their shots fell into the bucket, and only 4 for 25 from beyond the arc. Texas Tech missing 21 three-pointers. Alabama also missed a bunch of three-pointers. They went 19 for 42, however, so they just took a bunch of threes, and that's kind of what this Alabama team does. They're going to take a bunch of threes, and if they get hot, they get hot, and if they don't, they don't, but they're going to have an opportunity against Michigan for sure. Alabama averages 35% from the three-point line. Michigan averages 36%, but Alabama averages 10 more three-point attempts per game. Bama is averaging 35 3-points per game. Michigan is only averaging 25 per game. I don't know. I think Alabama can give them a fight. I think it honestly just depends on, is Alabama, are they shooting well? Because if they're shooting well on any given day, they can win. Texas Tech, by the way, they beat Akron 91-71 in the first round, but they did not stand a chance against Bama in the round of 32. Then we have Tennessee moving on to the Sweet 16. They upset Virginia. I'd love to see a Tennessee-Bama game in the Elite Eight. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think either of them will win, but they could. It would be possible. Shout out to Tennessee. First off, they played Miami, Ohio, who was probably the most controversial team of this whole tournament. Miami, Ohio, who went 31-1, lost their first game in the conference tournament. They didn't win the MAC. They get in as an at-large team. They beat SMU in the playoff game, and then they lose by 22 against Tennessee. So Miami, Ohio did not prove it. I don't think they really proved it. I do think they deserve to be there. I wish they hadn't have been a play-in seed, but at least they got to win a game. That's good for them, I guess. Tennessee moving on with the 78-56 win over Miami, Ohio. Meanwhile, Virginia, they move on with a 82-73 win over Wright State. Wright State kept it close, played well. They gave Virginia a fight, a 14 seed. Shout out to Wright State as a 14 seed, only losing by 9 against the 3-seeded Virginia Cavaliers. But Virginia comes up short against Tennessee. Tennessee pulls away at the very end. Virginia was right there the whole time, but Tennessee ends up pulling away. They win it 79-72 over the Virginia Cavaliers. And so Tennessee headed to the Sweet 16. Definitely not a Cinderella team, but as a 6 seed to make it to the Sweet 16, you're not favored to do it. And they did, and now they're going to take on Iowa State, who it's going to be an interesting showdown for them for sure. And finally, the last team we need to talk about moving on to the Sweet 16 is the Iowa State Cyclones. They destroyed Tennessee State 108-74 in the first round. The Cyclones looked very, very dominant. Meanwhile, Kentucky beating Santa Clara 89-84 in a overtime game, which personally I thought Santa Clara got screwed. I think Santa Clara deserved to win that game. They hit a three to take the lead with about 2 seconds to go. Their coach tried to call a timeout to set the defense. The referee just completely ignored him, and Tennessee ends up hitting a three to tie the game. And then Kentucky hits a three to tie the game, literally a buzzer beater three as time expires. Then Kentucky moves on to win by 5 in overtime. So it was Kentucky that moves on there. Again, I thought Santa Clara got screwed. They got robbed. The referee, if he calls a timeout, you never know what could happen there. But Santa Clara probably wins if they can have time to set their defense. Either way, Kentucky moves on, and they did not deserve it, and they proved they did not deserve it because they got destroyed by Iowa State. They lose 82-63. Iowa State winning by 19. Kentucky struggled to score points. That's as simple as that. Iowa State's defense was strong, and so Iowa State against Tennessee in the Sweet 16, that's going to be a fun game. I think Iowa State probably is the better team. They shoot better from the threes. They shoot better from the free throw line as well. They shoot better from the field. So Iowa State is just a better scoring offense. But Tennessee is more physical. They get more rebounds, more offensive rebounds, more defensive rebounds. Iowa State more steals, however. Tennessee more blocks. It'll be a good game. I'll take Iowa State to win and move on. I'll be rooting for Tennessee, however. Again, like I said, I'd love to see a Tennessee-Alabama showdown in the Elite Eight. But that means we do need 2 upsets to happen. We need Tennessee to upset Iowa State. We need Alabama to upset Michigan. Can it happen? Sure. Will it happen? Probably not. I want to talk Max Crosby. We never really mentioned this, but the Max Crosby-Baltimore Ravens trade, it fell through. A very interesting story there. I guess he failed his physical, so the Raiders are going to get Max Crosby back. The Ravens get their 2 first-round picks back. Some people saying the Ravens just backed out for no reason. I do believe the Ravens story. I think it's very possible that he did fail his physical. What does that mean for the Las Vegas Raiders? Well, I think it means in a weird way, they actually got better. You know, I get that the first round picks would help, but Baltimore's not sending you great picks. They're sending you picks in the late first round because they're a good team. They win a lot of games, and so they're not giving you a top 10 pick. They're giving you maybe the number 20 pick, and then maybe next year the number 25 pick, depending on how well they do this year. Meanwhile, instead, the Raiders have already made some big moves. They signed a new center in Tyler Lindblom. They added a couple guys into their defense as well. They're beefing up their offensive line, and they're going to have the number 1 pick, Fernando Mendoza, at quarterback. Those are all good moves to make, and you have a new head coach, and now you got Max Crosby back. So I think the Raiders, in a weird way, actually improved. They spent money thinking they were going to save money on Max Crosby. Now they have Max Crosby. They're still below the cap, so it's not like it's ruined their cap or anything like that. It's not like it ruined their financial situation. And you get one of the best defensive ends in football who loves playing for the Las Vegas Raiders. It's not like he wanted out. I think he did want to play for a contender. Well, now he's going to play for a Raiders team that has spent money and it's going to have the number 1 overall pick at quarterback throwing the ball. So this could work out really well for both sides, actually. And for the Ravens, they did find a replacement for Max Crosby, who we'll talk about in just a sec. And like I said, how do you replace Max Crosby? Well, you replace him with the best defensive end in all of football. That's right. The Ravens, they end up signing Trey Hendrickson to a massive deal, bringing probably the best defensive end in the league to Baltimore. So The Max Crosby trade falls through, you get Trey Hendrickson instead. And that matters a lot. Trey Hendrickson, really, really good player. We were wondering, where's he going to sign? Where's he going to go? He is going to Baltimore. And that makes this Baltimore front very scary, right? We thought it was going to be Max Crosby up there. I actually think Hendrickson is better than Max Crosby. So for the Ravens to be able to get Hendrickson, to be willing to spend that money, I think that shows they are committed to winning. They are committed to giving Todd Monken, who's their new coach? It's not Todd Monken, is it? Is it Todd Monken? No, it's Jesse Minter. Giving Jesse Minter the best defense he can possibly have. It's a 4-year contract, $112 million, $28 million per year on average. The deal includes $60 million guaranteed, a $20 million signing bonus. It's a huge deal. He's finally getting paid. Hendrickson, he's been trying to get paid for a while now, for a couple years. The Bengals were being very frugal. They weren't giving in. Now he gets paid by the Ravens. Good for him. He's earned it. He's had a great career, great story. He comes out of nowhere with the Saints, then goes to the Bengals and becomes one of the best defensive players in all of football. Now he's getting his money, and he's going to play for a really, really good contending team in Baltimore. So that is Trey Hendrickson. The drama, the news, the rumors, the speculation, it's all over. He's going to Baltimore. And we have a fun little reunion story. Geno Smith, he's going back to the Jets. Headed back to New York is Geno Smith on a 1-year deal where he is apparently going to be the starter for the Jets. I think the Jets really got screwed by Dante Moore. I think they wanted to draft him at number 2. I think they would have drafted him at number 2. However, he's not going to the draft this year. So the Jets needed to pivot and figure out, hey, if we can't get Dante Moore this year, how can we get him next year? And they looked at the Raiders and said, hey, look, the Raiders got the number 1 overall pick. So how'd they do it? Well, they started Geno Smith for 15 games. They only won 2 of those 15 games. They lost all the rest of their games, and they got the number 1 pick. So the Jets said, well, you know what? We can do that too. So they have signed Geno Smith. I think the Jets are clearly tanking. I don't think this is a win now move. I think the Jets want the number 1 overall pick, whether it's Arch Manning or Dante Moore, whoever it ends up being. They want their pick of whoever quarterback they want in the 2027 draft. And the best way to do that, the best way to guarantee yourself the number 1 pick, is to bring in a really bad quarterback and pair him up with a really bad roster. That's what the Jets have. They have a bad roster. I think they have a bad coach in Aaron Glenn. I don't think he's a good coach. He certainly hasn't proven himself yet. The roster is not very good, and now the quarterback, Geno Smith, not very good either. He was good. He had a couple good years with the Seahawks. I'll give it to him. In Seattle, he was a top 10 quarterback, but he was probably the worst quarterback in the league last year with the Raiders. He's only getting older, and I don't think the Jets are going to be able to elevate him the way Seattle did. Seattle elevated him. They had good coaching staff, good roster around him, and a good defense. The Jets have none of those things. The Jets also don't have an offensive line. It's going to be a rough showing, I think, for the Jets and for Geno Smith, but I think that's exactly what the Jets are hoping will happen. That's what they want. They want the number 1 overall pick, and I think they could get it with Geno Smith at the helm. And meanwhile, we have news in New York. The Jets are trading away Justin Fields. He is going to the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs, is that going to be the guy who starts the season for them? That's the real question, because Patrick Mahomes may or may not be available to start the season. If he's still injured, it would be Justin Fields. Apparently, the Packers actually were interested as well, but the Jets end up getting the job done. They trade it to the Chiefs for a 6th-round pick. And yeah, Fields headed to Kansas City. Right now, he's QB1. As soon as Mahomes is healthy, he becomes the backup. But there's a chance Fields does get a couple games in this season if Mahomes is injured. I think for the Chiefs, it's a smart move. They want a quarterback with experience. They want a quarterback who can win them some games, right? Let's say Mahomes misses the first 4 games of the season. Well, they have Fields there who can probably win you. At least maybe he can go 2-2 with that roster. If you can even go 1-3 with Fields, you give yourself a shot. But if you can go 2-2 with Justin Fields, you give yourself a real opportunity at, you want Mahomes, if he's going to miss time, you want him to come back with as few games to win as possible, right? If Mahomes comes back to an 0-4 Chiefs team because Chris Olajuwon lost all 4 of their games, well, all of a sudden Mahomes now has to go like 12-3 down the stretch. And that's probably not going to happen, right? 12-1 down the stretch, So you want to set Mahomes up for success. You want to give him an opportunity to make the playoffs. If the Chiefs are like, yeah, if Fields can go 2-3 in 5 games, then turn it over to Mahomes, and then Mahomes, all he has to do is maybe go like, be 8-4, which he can do 8-4. But if he's if the Chiefs are 0-5, then all of a sudden Mahomes has to go 10-2. It's a lot harder. So yeah, the Chiefs definitely are going to need Fields to win a couple games for them if Mahomes isn't healthy. If not, it's just a backup quarterback. We'll see. We'll see if he ends up playing. I think he will. I think Mahomes will not be ready by opening day. I think Fields will get at least 2 starts. That's my guess. And the last thing I want to talk about today, flag football. Team USA flag football. We're not super, it's not something we talk about all that often, flag football, but because it's coming to the Olympics in a couple years, I think it's worth talking about. Team USA put on a show. They had a little tournament on Fox. It was over in, I believe, Saudi Arabia is where it was held, between the NFL legends, the NFL superstars, and Team USA. So Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts and Saquon and a bunch of current NFL superstars. That was one of the teams. One of the teams was led by Tom Brady. It was NFL legends. They were called the Founders team. And then there was the actual Team USA national team. And as you'd expect, the NFL players did not dominate at all. They got destroyed, actually. Team USA winning both of their games in what was a round robin showdown. Joe Burrow threw a pick six. It was bad. I mean, it was awful. Team USA outscored their opponents 82-36. It's interesting because everybody kind of expected, hey, in the Olympics in 2028, the NFL players are going to go out and play flag football for Team USA, and I don't know if that's going to be the case anymore. I actually think the USA national team guys are the ones who are going to be out there representing us. So we're going to get to know some new athletes, some new players, guys who are not traditional NFL players. It's a different sport. Flag football is a very different sport than the NFL. We got to see that on show on national TV. We saw just how different it is. You can't just play tackle football and walk in and play flag. It's a totally different sport. You're pulling flags. It's a lot more speed. It's a lot more about shiftiness. You can't make a whole lot of contact. So it's not when you take a contact sport and tell them, hey, we want you to play a non-contact version of your sport, yeah, it becomes a lot harder. It'd be like saying, hey, we're going to play basketball, but you can't touch each other. Well, it's going to be a different sport. Shooting would become way more important than any sort of physicality. And that's kind of what it is for football now. Flag football is very finesse. It's much about skills, speed, and finesse. Real football is a lot about physicality. It's about toughness. It's about, can you hit a guy? Can you bring a guy down? That's not what you need in flag football. You need speed and finesse and really just a lot of intricate skills, which the NFL guys didn't seem like they had. Now, again, they haven't really practiced. Who knows what will happen when it comes 2028? Maybe we will see some NFL guys out there, maybe at least at some positions. I would still say you should get an NFL quarterback out there, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know. The flag football team looked really good for Team USA, so that might be what we do come the Olympics in 2028.